Hi folks, it is me, the Bee, and welcome back to another review. Okay, so as many of you film buffs out there may be aware, today or yesterday, depending on where you are in the world, is John Carpenter's birthday, the John Carpenter. And in the past, I have indeed reviewed quite a few of his films to varying degrees of success. But today, I just wanted to mark this particular occasion by reviewing Assault on Precinct 13, made in 1976, starring Stoker, Darwin Jonston and Laurie Zimmer. Where to start with this movie? Assault on Precinct 13 was made before John Carpenter reached the international success of Halloween, and it was more or less made on a very, very slim budget. It was essentially what you would call an exploitation film. It's got shocking acts of violence and eclectic characters and transgressive plot themes, but therein lies the beauty of this movie. It is so straightforward. It is very elementary in its approach to story, characters, and the overall result. The filmmaking is guerrilla, to say the least. It was made on virtually no budget. Well, obviously he would have had, Carpenter himself would have obviously had money, but he did not sit back on expenses. He didn't have that sort of luxury of being able to request a specific amount of time to make this movie. No, he had to make this, on the go. And there was a time back in cinema when this was basically the norm, and that's what gives this film its extra edge. It takes place in a suburban sort of environment, very sort of suburban, and the basic story is as follows. You have this big league criminal gang coming together to form a cholo, and to the best of my knowledge, a cholo is basically a gang that is going out for vengeance. It is basically a posse. And in this case, this cholo is seeking revenge for their fallen. And the perpetrators of this crime to them are the police department. Now, they happen to corner the titular Precinct 13, and Precinct 13 has this bunch of very eclectic, interesting characters. One of them being a cop, the other one being a criminal, a very notorious criminal, Napoleon Wilson, played by Darwin Jonston. And Darwin Jonston was a very huge blaxploitation star, and he was also a very good friend of John Carpenter, and this may also interest you. Stoker, who plays the cop, Bishop, was a neighbour of John Carpenter in the past. So this was basically a very sort of close and intimate sort of movie in terms of its production. So anyhow, this cholo surrounds the precinct, and basically it is a siege movie, a very tense, very breakneck siege film. Now, I will not say I absolutely love Assault on Precinct 13. It's got its flaws, and a lot of it comes from the time constraints that was put on it. But for a film that was made back in the 1970s before censorship became a thing, this showed one of the most shocking deaths ever on camera. It involves a little girl and an ice cream. And when people saw this movie, there was an outcry, man. There was a hell of a controversy going on. But this infamy adds to the film's brilliance. It's not afraid to go to these places. It is completely fearless in its approach. And whatever limitations it had, it exceeded it by just keeping it very simple. It doesn't get wound up in a sense of false pretension and trying to overanalyze and over-explain what it's going to do. It is telling you a straightforward story, and if you want to go along with it, fine. If you don't, take it or leave it. The performances in this movie are very underrated, and one of them being Laurie Zimmer as Lee. People say that she sleepwalks through her performance, but let me put it this way. If Lee were a male character, still maintaining the same attitude and demeanor, he or she would not have been criticized. And to me, Lee is one of Carpenter's most badass female characters. She is able to take a gunshot to the arm without even a flinch. I mean, it's very, hyper-stylized and hyper-realistic, but I feel in the circumstance is completely permissible. And then you have Stoker and Jonston as two figures on either side of the law. Obviously, to begin with, they are at odds, but as things, start to become more and more intense and frightening and life-threatening, these two have no choice but to come together. And they realize that they have a little more in common than they originally thought. On the other side of the fence, you have Street Thunder, and that's the name of this criminal army that's coming after them. Most interestingly enough, even though these are murderous people, they are made up of ethnic minorities all across the spectrum. You have African Americans, you have Hispanics, you have people of Asian descent, you have Puerto Ricans, you have this widely different smorgasbord of people coming together, being united in their cause to take these people down. Even though these two parties are at odds, the same thing unites them together. It is to, look after their common interests, and the only way to do that is to band together, because strength comes in numbers. And that is no more apparent than it is when the Cholo actually does break into the precinct and start to cause hell. It's a great sequence. And yes, it is decidedly more low-key than what we're used to these days, but this is just going back to the fact that this is a very elementary sort of movie. But yeah, it really does depend on how you want your action. But if you are able to appreciate when this film was made and under the constraints it was made under, it is one of the finer examples of guerrilla filmmaking you are ever likely to come across. So, since I have the time, I just want to talk very, very briefly about the remake. I really do like the remake, made back in 2003, starring Lawrence Fishburne and Ethan Hawke. Obviously, it takes the very basic plot beats of the original, but it still manages to have its own sort of fresh life about it. It's one of those few sequels, or not sequels, but it's one of those few remakes that, if not improve on the first one, but respects it. It respects the original film while also doing the same thing. It's a lovely sort of rare example of how something can go right when it could have easily have gone wrong. So that being said, the themes on Assault on Precinct 13, you really could not be less complicated. It's about good versus bad, finding mutual ground and fighting together. And Carpenter seems to have a sense of optimism about this, even though the situation is so hopeless when you think about it. You have there's people inside the building, and you have all these others outside of it having the very same sort of psychology. We got to come together if we want to achieve our goal. Teamwork! Yeah. So I would give Assault on Precinct 13 a 3.5 out of 5. It is not Carpenter's best movie by any stretch of the imagination, because, in my opinion, The Thing is the best Carpenter movie. But in saying that, when it comes to low-budget filmmaking and, working economically and using every resource at your disposal, 1976 Assault on Precinct 13 does that. It does that in spades. And, it doesn't pretend to be more than anything it is. Or, it doesn't pretend to be more than what it is. And therein lies what makes it a classic. So thank you very much, guys, for listening to me, and as usual, I shall see you in the next video. Bye bye for now.